The movie opens with a man named Hutch Mansell sitting in police custody. Even while surrounded by officers, he looks strangely calm. The cops ask him a simple question: "Who are you?" And instead of answering directly, Hutch starts telling them his story. On the surface, Hutch seems like the definition of an average guy. He works a boring desk job at his father-in-law's company, lives in a quiet neighborhood, and spends his days following the same dull routine. At least until one night changes everything. Late at night, two thieves break into his house, a young man and a woman. They take cash, valuables, and Hutch's expensive watch. Hutch notices a tattoo on the female thief's wrist. That tiny detail sticks in his mind. Right then, Hutch's son Blake suddenly attacks the intruders, trying to stop them. And honestly, this was the perfect chance for Hutch to step in and take them down. But he doesn't. Instead, he lets them walk away. To Hutch, the thieves don't look dangerous. They look desperate, scared, almost like they're stealing out of necessity. But the moment the thieves leave, Blake looks at his father with disappointment. Soon after the police arrive, Hutch starts realizing maybe he made the wrong choice. What if those people had hurt his family? What if things had gone worse? And the officers don't help either. One cop even tells him that if it had been his family, he never would have let the thieves leave so easily. That comment hits hard. Hutch's relationship with his wife was already falling apart before this incident. Now things get even colder. His own son loses respect for him too. The only person who still genuinely loves him is his little daughter, who continues treating him like a hero. The next morning doesn't get any better. Even Hutch's neighbor mocks him, asking why he didn't do anything. Everyone keeps acting like he failed as a man, as a husband, and as a father. By the time he gets to work, he's already mentally exhausted. But the humiliation still isn't over. His brother-in-law Charlie corners him at the office and starts lecturing him too. Charlie says if something had happened to his sister, Hutch would have been responsible. Then, almost out of pity, Charlie gives him a gun so next time he can actually protect his family. And right here, something starts shifting inside Hutch. After that, he visits his father-in-law Eddie and tells him he wants to buy his old factory. It sounds random at first, but deep down, Hutch is craving something that actually belongs to him. Nobody respects him anymore, and maybe owning that factory will finally give him a sense of purpose. Not long later, Hutch enters a hidden room and contacts his brother Harry through a secret radio setup. Hutch calmly explains that the thieves were terrified. He mentions the gun they carried wasn't even loaded, and he could instantly tell it had never been fired before. He says that is why he let them go. Now hold on. How does an ordinary office worker notice details like that? The way Hutch talks makes it obvious he wasn't always this harmless suburban dad. There's something buried in his past, something dangerous. Later, Hutch visits his father David, a retired FBI agent now living in a nursing home. Hutch tells him everything that happened and admits that everyone around him sees him as weak now. Even his own family has started looking at him differently. But the real breaking point comes when Hutch returns home. His daughter tells him her kitty cat bracelet is missing. She thinks the thieves may have taken it because it was kept with the stolen cash. And suddenly, Hutch stops caring about the money completely. The watch didn't matter. The cash didn't matter. But his daughter's bracelet, that crosses a line. Without wasting time, Hutch returns to his father and takes his old FBI badge and gun. Then he starts visiting tattoo shops across the city, searching for the same tattoo he saw on the female thief's hand. Finally, at one last tattoo parlor, Hutch shows his ID. The owner laughs and says the badge expired over 20 years ago, and the photo on it isn't even Hutch. Before Hutch can respond, several thugs surround him inside the shop. Hutch casually offers them money to back off. But then the shop owner notices a strange mark on Hutch's wrist. And instantly, his face changes. The man quietly locks himself inside another room. The others immediately understand they're dealing with someone far more dangerous than they expected. Suddenly, everyone becomes cooperative, and they give Hutch the address connected to the tattoo. A little later, Hutch arrives at the thieves' apartment, enters, and calmly explains that he's just an ordinary man with a family. All he wants back is his watch and his daughter's bracelet. The thieves return the watch, but they swear they never took the bracelet. Hutch is seconds away from snapping when he suddenly hears a baby crying. He walks deeper into the apartment and discovers a sick child connected to oxygen equipment. Without saying another word, Hutch leaves the apartment. But even though he walks away peacefully, the rage boiling inside him hasn't disappeared. Later that night, Hutch boards a bus heading home, and almost like fate is testing him, a group of drunk thugs suddenly enters the bus and starts harassing a young woman. Now, Hutch's patience is already hanging by a thread. You can practically feel it. His hands are itching for an excuse. So, Hutch quietly tells the bus driver to step outside. Then he shuts the doors behind him. At first, things don't go smoothly. Hutch actually takes a brutal beating, but then something inside him wakes up, and the entire bus turns into a cage. One by one, Hutch starts overwhelming the thugs with terrifying precision. Even after getting stabbed, Hutch keeps fighting like a man who barely feels pain anymore. At one point, he gets thrown out through the bus window. The female driver asks if he's okay. Hutch says nothing. He simply gets back in the bus. That silence alone tells you everything. Moments later, the thugs are completely helpless. Hutch leaves several of them badly injured. Back at home, his wife patches up his injuries. Looking at the wounds, she quietly says something chilling. Maybe Hutch's old days are coming back. Old days? Yeah, Hutch is definitely not a normal man. The movie picks back up with the introduction of Yulian, one of the most feared mob bosses in Russia. But instead of sitting on a throne surrounded by guards, he's performing on stage inside a nightclub, singing and dancing himself. Some of the men around him quietly question his personality behind his back, wondering how someone like him became so powerful. Yulian overhears the disrespect, and within seconds, he violently proves exactly who he is. The atmosphere in the room instantly changes. Nobody dares question him again. Not long after, Yulian visits his younger brother, one of the thugs Hutch destroyed on the bus. The man is barely recognizable after the fight. Furious, Yulian demands to know who did this. One of the surviving gang members nervously explains that it was all done by just one man. At first, Yulian doesn't believe it, but when the man swears he's telling the truth, Yulian realizes something is seriously wrong. Hutch unknowingly left his Metro card on the bus that night. Through it, Yulian gains access to Hutch's full identity and personal information. The next morning, Hutch is peacefully eating breakfast with his family when he gets a call from his brother Harry. Harry warns him that one of the men from the bus belonged to Yulian's crew, and now Yulian is hunting him. Harry tells Hutch to immediately contact someone known as the Barber. When Hutch meets the Barber, things become even darker. The Barber explains that Yulian controls enormous criminal wealth connected to multiple Russian gangs. He isn't just another thug, he's connected to an entire criminal empire. And by now, Yulian probably already knows everything about Hutch. And he's right. In fact, the woman who pulled Hutch's records becomes so disturbed by what she discovers that she immediately quits her job and refuses to work for Yulian anymore. Whatever Hutch used to be, even experienced criminals are terrified of it. That night, Hutch sits down for dinner with his family and casually mentions taking a vacation to Italy together. At first, it feels like he's trying to bring normalcy back into their lives, but then he notices movement outside the house. Several men are approaching, Yulian's people. Hutch instantly locks his family inside the basement to keep them safe. Then he shuts off the lights across the house and waits silently in the darkness. And one by one, the intruders start disappearing. The moment they step inside, Hutch begins taking them out with ruthless efficiency. Every move feels calculated, like he's done this hundreds of times before. But during the fight, one attacker manages to stun Hutch with an electric weapon. The gang drags him into a car and starts driving away. But big mistake. Hutch regains consciousness mid-ride, grabs a weapon inside the vehicle, and suddenly attacks the men transporting him. The car spins out of control and crashes violently into a pole. Hutch crawls out and immediately runs home. By the time he gets there, the entire house looks like a war zone. He showers, lets his family out of the basement, and tells his wife to take the children somewhere safe. Then he grabs a bag filled with gold bars and heads downstairs. Now comes the truth. Hutch begins speaking to one of the surviving gang members, finally revealing who he really is. Years ago, Hutch worked as a government assassin, the kind sent after the worst criminals imaginable. His job was to eliminate people no one else could stop, and according to Hutch, he was very good at it. But one mission changed him forever. While preparing to punish a criminal, Hutch listened as the man begged for another chance. The criminal claimed he truly regretted everything and wanted to change. For reasons Hutch still can't fully explain, he decided to spare the man's life. Years later, Hutch secretly checked on him and discovered the man had genuinely transformed. He was living peacefully with his family, happy as an ordinary citizen. That moment changed Hutch completely. For the first time, he believed maybe he could live a normal life too. That's why he abandoned his violent past and became the quiet suburban husband everyone sees today. But before Hutch can even finish telling the story, the surviving gang members downstairs quietly die from their injuries. And then, Hutch notices something unbelievable. Hidden underneath the couch is his daughter's missing kitty cat bracelet. It was in his house the entire time. The realization hits hard. If he had found it earlier, none of this chaos would have happened. None of these people would have died. Afterward, Hutch sets his own house on fire to erase the evidence, steals his neighbor's car, and disappears into the night. At the same time, 2 assassins arrive at the nursing home to kill Hutch's father, David. Unfortunately for them, they have no idea they're targeting a retired FBI agent. The second they make their move, David destroys both attackers with shocking ease. Elsewhere, Hutch arrives at his father-in-law Eddie's factory carrying gold bars. Using them as payment, he officially buys the entire building. And honestly, you already know what's coming. He's turning the factory into a battlefield. As Julian learns that Hutch escaped and wiped out his men, he begins gathering every available soldier from across his criminal network. Meanwhile, Hutch rigs the factory with traps, explosives, and hidden surprises, preparing for all-out war. But before the final showdown begins, Hutch makes one more move. He visits Julian's hidden money vault, the place where massive amounts of mob cash are stored. Hutch tears through everyone guarding the place and then sets the entire fortune on fire. Millions disappear in flames. After that, Hutch walks directly into Julian's nightclub. Immediately, Julian's men aim their guns at him, but Hutch came prepared. He reveals a bomb strapped to himself and calmly explains that he only wants to talk. The moment Julian sees the explosive, he orders everyone else out of the room. Now, it's just the 2 of them. Hutch tells Julian that once he threatened his family, things became personal. That's why he destroyed all of Julian's money. Then Hutch gives him one final piece of advice. Use whatever money you have left, disappear, and try living like a decent human being for once. Then Hutch walks away, and exactly as expected, Julian takes the bait. He gathers his entire army and follows Hutch straight to the factory, which was Hutch's plan all along. Inside, Hutch's brother Harry is already waiting with a sniper rifle. Moments later, David arrives too, excited to finally experience some action again after years of retirement. And then, complete chaos erupts. The traps hidden around the factory begin activating one after another. Explosions, gunfire, and ambushes turn the building into absolute madness. Harry may technically be a pilot, but he fights like a trained killer. Together, the 3 men wipe out wave after wave of attackers. Bodies start piling across the factory floor. But during the battle, Julian manages to shoot Harry. Soon after, Hutch and the others begin running low on ammunition. Realizing the fight is reaching its final moments, Hutch grabs the same bomb he brought to Julian's club earlier. He places it beside a piece of bulletproof glass and slowly walks toward Julian. Julian keeps firing at him, but Hutch doesn't stop. And the second Hutch reaches him, boom! The explosion tears through the room, killing Julian instantly. Somehow, Hutch survives the blast. Moments later, the police finally storm the factory. Before they enter fully, Hutch secretly helps Harry and David escape, while he stays behind and allows himself to be arrested. On the way out, Hutch calls his wife and quietly tells her something she's probably wanted to hear for a very long time. It's over. The story then returns to the present timeline, back to Hutch sitting inside police custody. Just as the officers are trying to process everything they heard, they suddenly receive a phone call from a government agency. Immediately, their behavior changes. Without another question, they release Hutch. 3 months later, Hutch and his wife are house hunting together, finally trying to rebuild their lives. Everything almost feels peaceful again. Then Hutch receives a phone call. Whatever he hears instantly changes his expression. He quickly turns to the realtor and asks one very important question. Does this house have a basement? And in the final moments, we see Harry and David loading up weapons and heading toward Hutch once again. Because deep down, they all know this story is far from over.